All right, welcome back to another live streaming session of 3D game development with Unity. This is a ongoing learning series. As I learn, you learn. Everything that I am showing you and everything we're building here together are things that I am uh, encountering as we go, and we're just kind of learning the process ourselves as we go through these tutorials. So, as I mentioned in the last video series or the stream, we would go ahead and start work on our player inventory system that will be used in game. Prior to this, we worked on the mini map with the compass, and I demonstrated that on the last stream. But we're moving into the inventory. It's time to do that. We're spawning items now. We just need to be able to create that pickup system and be able to store them in a inventory, in-game inventory for the player, and we need a way to display that, hopefully by pressing I for inventory and I again to close the inventory. So those are kind of the goals right now, what I want to accomplish. I don't know what we'll get done in the session, but let me start off with, I'll show you the basic player inventory screen that I did set up. I took some time off stream to get this laid out. There's no script attached to it. It's purely the visual screen that will pop up when you press I. And so let's do this so we don't get a lot of clutter here right now. Let's see if we can. I'm going to check that, and on the HUD we're going to temporarily disable that. Okay. And then let me zoom in on the see if we can actually move to where that is. All right, so you can basically see it here. Having some issues here getting right to it so we can get a good view on it. Let's see. All right, so that should about do it there. All right, now the UI system is actually, it kind of shows up funny in the scene here because it is in the 2D realm, which is the X and Y. It's not going to use any depth, and so if we highlight this right here, the UI panel is placed in 2D space. It's set for a width of 1920 by 1080. And anyways, it doesn't show exactly. It's not in a convenient place where we can see it. So, but anyways, needless to say, when the game is actually running, this will in fact, when it's turned on and off, because initially we'll have it disabled, and then when we hit I, we'll set it active, which will pop it up, and set it inactive when we hit I again to toggle it on and off. So it'll be turning on and off like that. But you see where it's being rendered on the screen. That's about where it's going to center on the screen. Of course, it may look a little bit different. Let's leave it on and let's just hit play to show you how that's going to show up. It should overlay on top of everything else, just like that. So the basic idea here, show this here. This is going to keep spinning on us because I'm moving. Let me increase this. I'm going to increase the game window since that's where it's showing kind of static. Better yet, I'll tell you what, let me back this down. We are temporarily also going to disable the island, so we won't see that. All we're going to see is our UI. That's what we want to work with right now. Let's flip that around. Zoom in a little bit too much. Okay, so basically what we have here, again, in the top left corner, or this left side, you see I've got these sectioned off in a UI object called a panel. Essentially, the way I built this, if we look at it from the top down, the UI player inventory is what I named the main canvas for this. And so, and then I created under that, and nested under that, a child object called a PI underscore panel, which stands for PI's player inventory. So these are all panels. All these sections, all these blocks are panels, with the exception of the white squares. Those are actual image placeholders. And so an image will show up there, a 2D sprite that will load to represent the items that are picked up. So essentially that's all I did. And with a bit of transparency and color, I changed the way it looks as far as the way it shows through. So we start with the main panel up top, which is the dark gray one. It's actually got a black tint to it on the back. And then we have PW, which is the primary weapon. SW is the secondary weapon. QS is the quick slots, that panel. SW, QS. And XS stands for extra slots, and that's the extra items that can be picked up and carried. And so the idea is if a primary weapon gets loaded, the main gun, whether it be a pistol or an AR or sniper, when we get those, they're going to show in this box. So it'll be, it's a little bit wider to support the guns that are going to be longer, like ARs and snipers. And these other boxes above and below are where the attachments would go. So top here would be a silencer. To the right of that would be a scope. This one here, bottom left, would be a laser sight. And on the right would be the clip, type of clip that's attached to the gun. All right, and then down below here, secondary weapon, like I said, one slot for that. Our quick slots. And keep in mind, the only items that are going to be able to be stackable, whether it be the quick slots or the extra slots, would be, be the ammo boxes that are picked up and anything marked as a consumable. So basically, ammo and consumable are stackable. And possibly collectible items. It just depends on what it is. I don't think I have any collectibles or anything tagged collectible, but we'll make sure. So we've got to work in the system, the ability to stack those items. One thing I want to add, I don't really have any way to show, like when you stack items, the count of the stack. Generally, I've seen in other games that have, you pull up your inventory and you're going to see, basically you're going to see like a number somewhere, either in the top left corner, top right, that indicates the quantity of that item. And so what we're going to need to do is, since there's no stackable items that'll be in here, this is strictly the primary weapon, secondary. In these quick slots and over here, we're going to need to add placeholders for the to show the count or the stack count. So, and I'm thinking, let's go to the quick panel first. See, I labeled all these slots. We expand all these out. You'll see I've labeled them all in a certain order. Primary weapon is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 is that. And then 7, 8, 9, 10 for the quick slots. The extra slots are 11 all the way down to 26. So we got 26 available slots to hold items. Now, when we have an array that's actually going to represent this list of items, the array is going to be, arrays are 0 based. So what we'll do is we'll set up an array. We'll just need to make sure we take that into account when we reload the items Um, you know, S1 actually will have item 0. I'm going to map out the first 10 to the first 10 elements of the array, 0 through 9. So, and then everything else will be there. So you'll see how it's done. I'm going to try to, it'll be consistent. And the array will be predefined for 26 elements. So we won't be resizing that array or doing anything like that. We'll allocate the memory for the player backpack for this particular backpack size. If we decide to add modify the inventory to support larger backpacks, the only thing that would really change would be the number of extra slots there. And so there's actually a scrolling UI element, a scrollable bar UI element. There's a way to have this, scroll and change the size, but for now we're just going to keep this a fixed size and get the system working with the other things that are more important, like picking up items and stacking them correctly and keep persisting the inventory throughout the game and that kind of thing. All right, so let's look at the UI elements and see if we can position one that is. I'd want the counter to be overlaid on top of the image, so we want to make sure we can do that. So if we go to let's go to our quick slots 7 here, for example. This will be this item right here. And let me just check to make sure there's not anything on here that's already built into it, and there isn't. So, yeah. So let's grab another UI element. Let's see, how is this anchored? First of all, it's anchored to the top right, and so is this probably. No, bottom left anchored there. So these are going to be a little different. Okay. Just means the way we position these things, because it's offset from the top right corner, the numbers are going to be counting backwards. Yeah, so let's add another UI. Let's go to UI. And let's see what we have here. Yeah, so there's a scroll view and then a scroll bar. Could have put a scroll view underneath all this and added a scroll bar and had it ready to go. It's probably going to be a simple fix. But we'll look at that later. We're going to use just a text box for that. So in this text, just so we can space it out a little bit, let's do that 1. Actually, it's going to start at 0. Would be the value, initial value. It'll show 0. That sure is awfully small. What happened? What happened to our number? All right, so got that text. Let's go. Let's make the width. Tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna make it. Let's see, the same width as these boxes. So, like, let's click on one of them. S7. Okay, the width is it's 180 with a height of 120. So we'll just make that text same thing. Width of 180, height of 120. Okay. And then we want to always, and then this way, if we make it the same size as that, now we, on this box, let's get the size of S, the position. Okay, it's negative 375, 0, and 0. So let's set that the same way. Negative 375, 0, 0. All right, so let's zoom that out a little bit. Okay, and that's actually perfect because let's see if we text to be 0, and then let's say we get one item, 11, 12, whoops. If we get into 3 digits, that'd be perfect. It'll show there. The only thing is we need to, so initially it'll be 0. Okay, and its alignment is left justify near the top, so that'll be perfect. And do best fit. I think it's I mean, I was trying to see if we can get it away from that edge. The only way I can see that happening is by inserting a space, one space before that. So if we then had like 11 items or 111 or 1000, we'd have that there. Now the other thing we want to do, but it really don't matter. I mean, if I think it's still legible. 1, 2, you can easily see what the count is. So we'll leave it at 0. And I don't know if we need to change the color yet. We might need to. So it is currently set to black. I'm going to have something like a light blue of some sort. Alright, so close that. Yeah, so that looks okay. It's easy to see. Or should we do it in yellow? Just I want something that's going to stand out when you're looking at it. It'll be easy to tell exactly. Lime green. Let's see. Yeah, let's leave it at that. We'll play around with that if we need to change the color to make it look better. We'll have to see how it looks in an actual scene when we're running this. And so we want to name these a certain way as well because we have S7. That's the slot 7, 8, 9. We probably want to have this is let's label it as S. It'd be great if we could just add another property actually to the main thing, like a text. But let's see. Not gonna be any easy way that I'm trying to decide if we need to name this or not because might not need to. If we make it a do it like that, nested, and then yeah, if we nest it, it looks like we don't necessarily need to worry so much about the position. I don't know why that went negative. We're going to change that. All right, so we do want to copy it though. We want to duplicate. let's just slide that over to S8, S9, S10. So and then the position, actually, I can clear those out. Let's select all three of those. It'll be 0, 0, 0. Yeah, so that pins them up across all those, so that's perfect. All right, so let's add another UI element down here called text. And let's look at this other one. What did we do? It was a font size 32. So I guess we just go ahead and add. That might be simpler. Just let's add text. We don't have to rename all these then. Add. Add text. And then we're going to be changing. A lot of the properties can be the same, so we can just multi-select them and then change them all at the same time. All right, so yeah, this is going to be one of those sessions where, all right, so I won't be chatting a whole lot. It'll be more about doing this work, but I'll explain as I go. If there's anything you don't understand, definitely type it in the chat. That's a real-time chat. I've got it up on my second monitor here, so if you need to ask questions or whatever, or you have a suggestion, go ahead and type it in the chat, and I'll see it, and I'll respond as quickly as I can. I wish there was a way to get a audible notification when somebody types a message in chat through YouTube. And it may be a setting. Maybe I just don't have it turned on. All right, so we have all these. We need to add one here for the 14 text. All right, so let's multi-select all these. And then let's see what we can change here. I guess we can set that to 0 on all of them. I think we went up to 28 on that. I can't recall. Set them all top left, and then these also, the width are going to be 180 by 120. Okay. I think we went up to 32. 32 or was it 36? 36 looks closer to it. And then we'll select our color from the preset I created before. Keep them all the same. So I'm looking down here at the preview. So it looks like we've got everything set up in the same spot. It's all named the same. It's a child of the object. And so it should be fairly easy to reference that. All right. So that's set up. So let's go ahead and save our scene with those changes. Little tedious things like that, I hate having to redo it. Alright, so that was fairly painless to put that in there, to be honest with you. So we'll close all that up, tidy it up so we don't have this lengthy thing to look at. And, okay, the next thing I want to do is just type the message in the chat to make sure the chat was working, and it is. So, okay, the next thing we want to do is, this is something I noticed. I wanted to show you this. It's on the scripting side, because we're going to be adding a couple, well, at least we're going to be adding another class variable to our item, inventory item class, to represent or hold the sprite for that item. So as a user picks up an item, we're tracking all this information about it, including the prefab name, but we need to have the sprite as well. Now, this is the other thing I did create. Let me show you the sprites as well. I went ahead and found this great little tool, nifty tool. It's called, it was free, it's called Easy Icon Maker. It's in the asset store. And what it'll do is it'll let you drop in a prefab that you have, a 3D model prefab. And you drop it into the, well, here, let me just bring this up and show you. It's a great little tool to have if you on a tight budget like I am. It's very simple. You just drop in your object here, your game object, which is a prefab of a model, 3D model. And you can specify a sprite location, but it has to use the forward slashes, not backslashes. It has a standard width of 256. Background color, you can change that if you want. The sprite type, you can go with Sprite or what they call the legacy. With the Unity 5 or higher, if you're using Unity 5 or like the 2017 versions, you want to go with Sprite for the sprite type. And then you can specify whether you can do an outline, and you can override the default color and set the width and all that if you want. But I didn't opt to do any of that. All I did was drop it in there and leave it at the default. And with the slash there, what it'll do is it'll drop your sprites actually down in your assets folder. Now I moved everything into an underscore sprites folder that I set up. But it's very simple. You just create it, drop it in there. It activates a button you click to generate those. And let's go here, and I'll just show you if I take that, boom, drop it in. See, there it is. Shows a preview. You hit render to sprite, and it renders your sprites. And so it creates them as a PNG file. If we go to the file system here, go to documents, and let's go down to our Unity projects, harvest, assets, and then sprites. And so it creates these sprites. And I left everything standard size because proportionally that'd be fine. But thinking about the, and I might have to do this for an AR if it changes, but the baseball bat initially was vertical. It was standing up. So if you go back and had to make an adjustment, because if we look at our screen here for the inventory, we can see here, this is where the bat would show up. Well, it's a sideways thing. I want it to lay sideways. So since the sprite is what's going to represent this, not necessarily the model that's in the 3D world, in the inventory. So what I did was just take that sprite, I flipped it, 90 degrees counterclockwise, and then I trimmed it a little bit and resized it to 500. I basically doubled the size to 500 by 246, so it closely matches the actual size of that box, because if you don't have your sprites at least close to that size, they get somewhat distorted because it does a kind of a stretch or fill when it puts it in there. Now you can actually control. Let's go to the actually right here. When you drop your sprite in there, for example, sprites. Let's drop our bat in there. Boom. Okay, see it shows the bat there. That's what's going to happen. We're essentially going to assign the source image of this property here to a sprite. And so when you drop it in there, it automatically stretched it a little bit. You can tell it stretched a little bit. Now there is this thing to preserve aspect ratio, so I'll probably go ahead and set that. And you'll get something like that. You've got some other options: sliced, tiled. Sliced, what that does is stretch the center, and that doesn't. No, I don't have it 9 sliced or whatever you call. There's this 9 slice thing you can do, but it's not really a slice tile. You could tile it if it's going to be tiled, but in this case, it's just simple filled or tiled. Let's see filled. Let's see what are the options there. Horizontal, fill origin, left. Fill amount, what is this? Oh, cool, you can only show a portion of it if you want. Preserve aspect. So again, I'm doing the simple and set native size. Okay, there we go. So native size, you can see it overlapped over here. So I guess in order to get it close to that, I'd really have to trim it fairly close to that to get that looking a little better, and we can do that. So let's set that to none for now. Let's put that back. Let's Control Z. I guess it messed that up. Okay, we're gonna have to leave that. Let's see, it'll stretch it quite a bit if we don't preserve the aspect. And that's probably what we'll do on all these, just preserve the aspect. It's still, you can tell what it is, it's a bat. But what I do want to experiment with is, if we set this to none, fine, let me save that, save our scene, highlight that one again. Okay, so it is preserving it now from this point forward. Once you drop one in, it remembers that preserved aspect. That's what I wanted to make sure. All right. So anyways, yeah, we have these sprites, and I used that tool, Easy Icon Maker, which is free in the asset store, to render sprites from my 3D models. I couldn't find anything else out there that would do it that didn't cost a whole lot of money. And so since this is an educational project, I was trying to keep the cost down. All right, so let's close that up and let's go back to actually the script side. What I was getting at, we're eventually going to be adding stuff to our inventory class item, but while I was looking at the stuff, excuse me, you know, I noticed we have, I originally had this here because the entire spawning system was in this inventory manager, but then it kind of evolved where I wound up, because it made more sense and more logical that the part of the spawning system needed to be built into the actual items. And so I created this inventory item attribute script that I would attach to any 3D model that I drop in as an item, and you know, you could set these values on it, and these are things that will be used as inventory items. There are other types of items down, you know, later on that may need a different script, but for what we're working on right now, this is the script that was created, and you can see I have a lot of these variable names duplicated, although when we look here, I actually was not using any of them. I think I started to migrate it into one file, and then it went, you know, got messed up. So here's what I want to do real quick here, is I want to move this public class inventory item out into its own script file. And then we'll add to it, and we'll add some getters and setters, which is basically our public get set, as opposed to having these variable names as public string, you know, m underscore item name, and so forth. These are all public, you see. That's not good object-oriented programming. It's not the best way to do it. You should never expose public variables directly like that. You should have functions that allow other modules or other code or other script to call it by a function to set the value or to get the value. So you can control what's happening to those values, and also do some data cleansing if you need to, or check certain parameters that make sure a value fits within a range, you know, that makes it valid for that variable. So we're going to move that into its own script. So let's jump back to here. We're going to add to the project. And we'll just do this in our script file here. We do C# script. We're going to call this I don't know if we should just call it inventory item. I guess we'll just do that. Inventory item. I don't think we have a script by that name yet. Alright, and it's a public class. And so now we're going to open that in here. And we're going to delete this stuff. We're not going to need that. We're also not going to, it's not going to be a mono behavior type. This is going to be a traditional C# class. It's going to be public, so we'll be able to incorporate that. And so actually, we already have the class name there, so we can get rid of some of that. So let's do this. So the first thing we can do is make all these privates. Then let's see what do we have. Quick actions and refactoring. There was a quick way. Encapsulate field. Let's see. Or encapsulate field, but still, and use proper, but still use field. I think this is what we want to do. I think it'll just do that for us. Let's see. Let's do that one and just see what happens. Okay, yeah. So now we have item name. That's what I wanted. So let's do that. Got the second option. Okay, so we got our category. And we could write this code, but it's just, this is definitely easier if it's available to do this. All right, so we have all of that. We all have our public gets and sets, and we at least have that set up. So if we need to do something special on those, we can. All right, so now Let's look back at our inventory item attributes. And yeah, we added 2 additional privates here, float, lifetime and start time, which are used internally here. So let's go ahead and move those as well. Let me see if we need to move them. Does it make sense to move them? I guess it would make sense we kept it all together, but let's see. Yeah, I guess we'll definitely move those out as well. So Control C, go to our inventory item. Let's drop those in there. And do our quick actions on each of those. Okay, so yeah, start time, lifetime. Okay, so those are set. All right, and those are privates. Now we need to go back to our inventory attributes. We can first of all delete this. Oh wait, Control V. Oops, Control Z, Control Z. Okay, those were originally set public. I remember now why. So they could be set on the individual items in the inspector. The values could be set up there. But we can still do that with the public, variations of those. So see this here, lifetime and start time. Those were declared private originally. We were trying to keep them private. They're used internally. Set lifetime in lifetime. Let's see. Got a public function here though, set in the lifetime. But that could really move into yeah, we could really just I think we've already moved them, so we don't necessarily need those. So we did need a access to the lifetime of public. But the start time is used exclusively inside here. And it's definitely a private. So I'm thinking I'm just wondering if lifetime even needs to. No, I think I'm going to take that out of there. These right here. We don't necessarily need those. So let's remove that. We can add them later if we decide it makes sense to put it back in there. But I mean, the start time, like I said, the start time was. We're not going to store a start time in an inventory file. That's something that is set dynamic and used on the fly. It's like a throwaway value. It's not anything that needs to persist with the item and track. And same with the lifetime. The lifetime can be modified or changed. It's going to be changed per item. So but we do want to get rid of these here. So what I'm going to do rather than delete them out, let's just comment out these. Yeah, we'll leave that just the way it is. And then instead of doing this, see what we can do then is say inventory item. Item properties equals new inventory item. And I'm going to probably need to go back here. Create a public constructor that does not require any parameters at all. It could be used, but it doesn't have to be. All right. Okay, so we've got this modified. Now, because these were public before, they showed up in the inspector. So, we can look at the inspector right now. And if we look at our prefabs, we've broken some stuff here. And it was down here. See, now all we have is, well, actually, it did retain it for now because I haven't saved the level yet. As soon as I save it, this stuff should probably disappear. But we want it to show back up. That certainly is holding on. I'm just wondering how, because it's inventory item attributes. They were public. They were showing up before. Yeah, so we no longer have them in here. Did we save the file? We did. Oh, but we declared this. So we want these properties to show through there. So we're going to have to make this we're going to have to serialize all these fields here, I think. These publics here, like let me check the names. Actually, maybe it updated with these names automatically. Maybe that's what I'm looking at. Category, action value, stack value, multi-use value. I don't think so, but Okay, in order for these to show up in the inspector, we're going to have to, because it's not a simple variable, we have to use this serialized field flag for each of these, and that allows it to show up in the inspector. And then the entire class has to be serializable. Why isn't that working? What are we missing here? I think it's using system. So it has to be put in here. Using Unity engine dot UI, was it? Let's just run that and see what it does, if it chokes on that or not. Look something up though. Actually, before I do that, I do want to look up something really quick in Unity documentation. Oh, it's system.serializable. Okay. I knew it was in system, but for some reason, I guess I spelled it wrong too. Okay, what do we have going on here? Okay, we also need to change. That's why stuff is so much still working. Yeah, we're gonna need to change this here. Basically, just want to get rid of that. Let me say inventory item. Well, we don't even need to do it, actually. We're it's declared somewhere else and just used. That was the definition. We just need to take that out of there. All right, and so this now is going to be, yeah, we've got some other public variables now that are set for that. got to fix all these since we moved all that around. So much for a quick fix, huh? This is the way it should have been done to begin with. As this program gets a little more complex and more things are going on, it's going to be easier to maintain. All right, what's going on now? Let's see. Inventory item attributes. Get the component. So item details dot. What did we call that? It's called item properties. Well, that's not working. Let's see. Okay, let's make this public. See if that makes a difference. It's called item for short because it's going to get pretty lengthy. I can see with some of this item. All right, so there we go. I think the action value is actually the public int action value. What's up with that? Why is that not working? There it is. Action value. Dot item. Alrighty, we're on our way. Item.m, multi-use, stackable, item.s. Alright, so I think we've modified everything that we needed to get this. Hey, what's up? That quick? You just got there. Alright, so sorry about that little interruption. We are at the point where I think we can at least try to run it to make sure it compiles. But now I also want to check these. Still don't know why these are showing up like this. Maybe it's picking it up automatically. I thought it would actually remove it and add it, but I guess it retained the values. I was expecting it to remove the values I had preset. All right, so that seemed to load up, but I forgot we disabled the UI. I mean the island, all that stuff, which is fine. That's what it. That's what we expected. So let's do this. So we forget. Let's untag that. Let's go to the HUD for that. We can turn that back on. Island, turn it back on. Save that. Save our scene. Okay, so we're getting somewhere now. Now we can add whatever else we need to add. Now I wanted to add. Now we got rid of that duplication. Now, anytime we update our inventory item class to add things, we'll put it up in here. So we're gonna have a private sprite okay, so I just added the sprite. Let's do the quick actions again on that. All right, so we have our sprite. Well, sprite should be something that we can then set now. Save this. Let's go to our inventory manager where it's actually loading up the prefabs at that point. And then so load all the prefab inventory. This code actually isn't even being executed. You see here, I just set this num spawn iterations to 0. So when it checks the spawn locations, num spawn iterations is 0. That's the code I had in before. I probably need to actually just remove that because it makes no sense. To actually have that. But I think what was happening before when I removed it, see there is this function here that gets spawn locations. That could have been, I need to look at that. I left it for that reason. There was still something going on when I removed this, if for some reason it broke something. So we're not actually spawning items from here. This part is never executed. Let's get to our function for okay, right here. This is where we add the item. I guess we need to go ahead and pass in the, let's go up to add item and see some add item. Yeah, it's creating new inventory item equals new inventory item. Item name, passing that. And then we need to get the 2D sprite texture and set that value. Now, what we can do, we don't necessarily have to modify the code here. We could just add a line here. And because we know that our texture names are the same as our prefab names, if we look here, when I use that tool to generate them, you see it's like baseball bat, bottle water, first aid, Jerry, mag, pistol, everything's capitalization is the same. Except this one was renamed. I don't know why. We just need to leave it as ammo box. Okay. And so, if we look at our prefabs, let's double check. Same thing, ammo box, baseball bat. It should be all be the same. Yeah, it's all the same. So we're going to just use the prefab name as the sprite name and just assign that to the field that we set up. Now, I do need to look up one thing here on Sprite. In code, how do you create a proper reference to a sprite texture? Because we're not just holding a string name like we did with the prefab name. We actually had just a string variable that was holding the name of the prefab, and then we would load it using this resources.load. Here we just added our sprite as an actual sprite data represented. It's an actual sprite object, not just a string name like we did here. So we're going to have to actually load that sprite texture into this item array as an actual sprite, not the name. So I need to look that up real quick. Public methods. Create a new sprite object. Okay. Create. Okay, sprite.create creates a new sprite which can be used in game applications. The texture needs to be loaded and assigned to create in order to control how the new sprite will look. In the example of a new sprite, okay, so we got public texture 2D text, private sprite my sprite, which is how we have it defined in our thing. Private sprite renderer. And then in the awake function, let's see. So you got to add a sprite renderer, color, transform that position. My sprite equals sprite.create. So you really need all that text, new rect, text width, height, vector 2. Okay, you don't necessarily need the sprite renderer. That's when you're actually drawing it at that point. A sprite renderer component will need to be added to a game object. Oh, actually, let's see, SR, private sprite renderer, SR, and then SR equals game object, add component, sprite renderer, S sprite renderer, and adds it to, yeah, so that's done at runtime when you're actually drawing them. I think just to represent it in memory, we're going to need this texture 2D. Which I'm trying to see where texture is actually set. Must be their default size, or maybe it scales up a new vector in this second. So really what we need is this right here. So looking at that texture 2D, get a small texture without objects, white texture, format. Okay, texture 2D creates a new empty texture. I understand that. So it's just creating an empty texture, and then this example though, I don't see where they're actually where the sprite, actual sprite image. Create a sprite startup. Assign a texture to the sprite when the button is pressed. Okay, so it's assigning a texture at that point to the sprite. My sprite is defined where? Private sprite, my sprite. Yeah, I still don't see anywhere where it's pulling. Unless the texture is it and they left that part out. But okay, how to display a Yeah, it's just like so many individual components they have set up to manage a simple little asset such as a sprite image. All right, is the documentation going to load or not? Jump over here. This edge is garbage. For some reason, it takes a while to load. Like, see, I put in a Chrome on my other screen, popped right up. Let me just look at it off screen here. Yeah, all the examples I'm looking at are setting up, basically dropping it in through the dropping a sprite image in through the inspector, but I want to do it all in code because we're going to be doing this in real time. I'm not going to be doing this in code, where it's not anything we're going to know ahead of time. So how to, let's see, we're going to type in another search. Bear with me 1 minute. How to a sprite game object in script using Unity. Let's see what comes up under that. All right, I think I may have found what I need here. Possibly. Let me do another search. It looks like somebody had written some script already or some code to do this, to read it from an actual file. Normally, a lot of the stuff is set up where it's stored as a resource in the project and taken from there. So let's do this. Trying to think where we can add this stuff. All right, so yeah, we're gonna have to create a class and another file here. I'm gonna keep this separate because this is gonna be a utility function that we could use somewhere else. So sorry about that. Let's go back to Unity here. Our scripts. Create new C# script. And we're gonna call this image to sprite. Basically, what that's going to do is be a class that will take an image file, a JPEG or a PNG, from a local file path, and it'll load that and convert it to a usable script object in the project. And it'll only load it once off the hard drive. If it finds it already in memory, it'll use it. So it's pretty efficient the way they had it set up. All right, so it's going to hang up now. Just didn't convert over. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this stuff here. We're not going to need this. So we're going to use system.collections and system.io. So we don't really need that. IO. And then let me just take what I see here, and we're going to add this in here. All right. So other than that little change, I guess we're okay. So this is going to change. They got a reference here. This is the usage of this. Basically, my sprite, which is going to be a sprite object, is equal to image to sprite dot instance dot load new sprite. You give it the file path, and you can optionally specify the pixels per unit. Default is 100. That's what I left it at when I created. So we're going to go with the default and see how that works. So in the load new sprite, where you pass in the file path to your actual JPEG or PNG, it creates a sprite object. Then it creates a texture 2D. Basically, your image file that you have is what's loaded in to the sprite texture, and then you call the sprite.create on your new sprite is equal to this. You use the static function create off sprite, pass it in the sprite texture, which is your file, image file, and because you're loading that, sprite texture has properties it knows. There's a width and a height value that are set, so you can use those to pass the second parameter in, which is a rectangle that indicates the size, the dimensions, and then a vector 2, and you pull in the pixels per unit, which is what's passed in as well up here. So, and then it returns a new sprite reference to that sprite that's been loaded into memory, and then yeah, so the actual load texture function is down here, and that's where it's reading the file, reading all the bytes for the file, loading into the texture 2D, and then it returns the reference of text 2D if it's loaded. If not, it returns null. So really, this should be checking. There's no check here for null. I mean, this should be if sprite texture not equal to null. Actually, what I'll say is a sprite texture is equal to null. Then we're going to set new sprite equal to null, and then we'll just return else. We're going to do that. We'll actually attempt new sprite, and if sprite.create fails, I mean, it'll set it to null as well. So in either case, we're at least checking that sprite texture is not null before we actually try to do that. So if you don't check it, if it is null and you try to perform an operation on it, you get a software fatal exception error. So it's referencing some memory that's invalid when it's trying to do this, whatever functions it does in the create. So that's a built-in Unity function. So we want to check for that. Anyway, so that's it right there. We can use it as is. So we'll copy this right here. That's going to be how we're going to use it. Go back to our inventory item. Actually, it's in the inventory manager here. This is where we want to actually load the sprites. So we're going to say item dot sprites is equal to, and we got to pass it our file path. And so I'm not sure what the reference to this file path is right now. If it needs to be, since we don't have it in this sprites in the special resources folder. I'm just wondering if we need to move it there or not. Or can we just say I guess we'll try it. Let's do /_sprites. Directing the asset. So okay, that's going to be underscore and then our actual file name, which should be same as the item name. And pixels per unit, that's optional. We'll just pass it into 100 just for the sake of it. All right, so let's see. What can we do now? Just to see if it loaded one of these, I want to go to the. Let's see if that compiles. If we get any errors at the bottom. Give it just a minute. Okay, so I don't see any errors. That means down at the bottom there, so it might be okay. Let's make sure our inventory items still load, because if it crashed with an error, our inventory items wouldn't have loaded. Let's see if they spawn here. I forgot we had our timer set to. So it may have been an issue because there's no items popping up. All right, so let's go back to. Oh yeah, we had this issue before. I forgot. Okay, so now it took away. Okay, that's what I was checking for. That's what I was expecting it to do before. So, yeah. The other thing we need to do is we need to disable all the items beforehand, because this was the issue we had before. So let's do this. Let's jump back to our script. So these are all serialized fields. And then we go to inventory item. Item showed up, and then we did that. And we might have to serialize this because it's. There were actually 3 errors there. Let's see if we can find them. Okay, inventory must add items. So I did have an issue with adding the item. Null reference, object reference not set to an instance of an object. Okay, we need to find. Instance of an object. So we did get an error during runtime. All right, so let's see. It did not serialize that stuff for us, so what we're going to do is we're not going to worry about that right now because I wouldn't want to set all those settings in the inspector anyways and have all that in every single item. Although, let's see, public. I was actually squabbling about that. Still not showing here. I don't know why it's not breaking it out there, but crap. It'll show simple variables. Serialize the field. Set that to serializable. Um, so we can look this up real quick. Hold up. Let's go ahead and slide this over as well so you can see what I'm doing here. Let me check the chat real quick. Nobody. Yeah, I can't do it there. That's why I couldn't do it there. You'll see a bunch of duplicated things over there. Anyway, what I'm searching for is how to serialize class items in inspector. Hey. We'll pick this up again as soon as I figure this out. I'll restart the stream. Thanks for viewing.